and welcome back to Let's Talk with Parul. On this platform, we've had many discussions on how to bring about positive change in women's lives. But whatever aspect of life we may bring up, if there's one thing we all agree upon, it's that change can only be brought about by action at various levels by all stakeholders involved. And a critical area to start this action is how women are perceived, what the world thinks about their roles and priorities. And today we are bringing this conversation on the portrayal of women in advertising to our community of women, of mothers, because it is the woman who in advertising is ceaselessly portrayed, incessantly targeted. I am quoting from the GenderNext study, a comprehensive, actionable insight study on the representation of women in advertising undertaken by ASCI and Futurebrands with Momspresso as the outreach partners. And our panel today has different voices: brand owners, creators, advisors, and regulators and consumers, all here to discuss how depictions of women in advertising has far-reaching impact on reinforcing or undercutting the long and arduous journey of women empowerment. So let me start by introducing our panel to you. Please welcome Swati Bhattacharya. Swati is the Chief Creative Officer at FCB India. She takes emotional storytelling for brands to a level where they break free from the constraints of media and formats and platforms and speak to consumers as ideas that make an impact to their lives, as is evident from her award-winning campaigns such as Sindoor Khela, Out and Proud, the Open Door Project, and so many others. And under her leadership, FCB India has won more than 160 awards, including the Glass Lion, Gold Lions, Clio Golds. The list is long. But her work has definitely transformed FCB's creative reputation, making it the #1 most awarded agency in India, and making her the 5th most awarded creative director in Asia, the 5th most influential woman in Indian media, marketing, and advertising. We're so pleased to have you here, Swati. Thank you so much for joining us. We also have with us Lipika Kumaran, Senior Vice President Strategy at Futurebrands. Lipika is a brand strategist whose expertise lies in putting brands in touch with the changing lives of their consumer, evolving product imaginations, socio-cultural shifts, everything that reshapes people and markets. Her experience spans early stints at leading advertising agencies like Ogilvy India, McCann Erickson India, and Publicis India, and the last 14 years at Futurebrands, consulting, crafting brand strategy for brands in diverse categories from food, finance, to automobiles and beauty. Thank you so much for joining us, Lipika. We also have with us Kartik, Johari, Vice President Marketing and Commerce at Nobel Hygiene Private Limited, India's largest manufacturer of adult and baby diapers. Under Kartik's leadership, the company has scaled 10x revenues in six years. He's also a member of the Forbes Business Council and was on the list of BW's 40 under 40 in 2021. A voracious reader, Kartik is passionate about deconstructing taboos, scaling problems, and human psychology. He's a part-time writer and a passionate angel investor. Thank you so much for joining us, Kartik.
Thank you.
And let's also welcome Manisha Kapoor, Secretary General, the Advertising Standards Council of India. She spent nearly half her work life in sales and marketing at Hindustan Levers, Johnson & Johnson's, and the latter half of her career has been as a consultant, helping companies establish and nurture brands through brand building, new product development, marketing strategy development, as well as media strategies. And under her leadership and vast experience with brands, ASCI itself has gone great. On the global circuit, she's been representing ASCI and has been elected as one of the vice presidents on the executive committee of the International Council of Self-Regulation, ICAS. Thank you so much. Warm welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this panel. We have a long discussion ahead of us, and I can't wait to start. I'm going to jump straight into it. Manisha, I'm going to start with you, in fact. So we started with how women are ceaselessly portrayed and incessantly targeted in advertising. Those women have grown in terms of owning their sense of self, with much greater aspirations and the will and the means to achieve those goals than ever before. In this context, where do you think advertising stands? Has advertising, we say that it's in part a reflection of society and in part a beacon of aspiration. So has advertising caught up with the women in their reality today? And is it talking to every kind of woman out there?
Yeah, so I think one is audiences themselves, as you say, have evolved, and perhaps the biggest shift in India in the last 10 years from a socio-cultural perspective is probably the journeys of women, and that as just a segment of consumers and markets and citizens has seen so much change. Technology has a lot to do with it. The fact that social media is here, and women have the ability to broadcast themselves, tell their own stories in their own words. All of these make a difference to the way that they are, and also in the way that they see themselves and their own stories. I think it would not be fair to say that advertising is completely lagging behind. I think there are a few brands, there are a few narratives that we see keeping pace with these changes, and being very contemporary as far as women and their own lives are concerned. But I think, as the report discovered, and the study discovered, that a lot of mainstream advertising still seems to be a few steps behind women's own imaginations of themselves. And I think that's what the report kind of discovered for us. And of course, there are a lot of other small nuances to it. But yeah, I think the net message is that yes, I think mainstream advertising still has a little bit of catching up to do. Women are moving at a pace that's really fast, and like I said, they have a voice. They have their own voice and their own ability to project themselves in ways that feel real and authentic to them. And I think advertising needs to be able to kind of recognize that change, uh, and depict those kind of just the sheer variety and diversity that women themselves are portraying about themselves. So I think there is a little bit of a catch up that advertising has to do in terms of mainstream advertising.
Right, there definitely is, and as we go through this conversation, we'll come across some of those the nuances that you were talking about. There are several repeating tropes, as we call them, stereotypes, which are still being thrust into ad campaigns, harmful stereotypes sometimes. So, I think my question to you, as a creator, I'd like to get some insight into what happens behind the scenes. So we all know that creating this content is not a quick job. It's not executed by one person alone. It's a long process. It's heavily discussed and debated. The people involved are highly creative, highly intelligent and aware people. How is it then that those problematic stereotypes or tropes, they get away? Are they just not being seen as problematic? Is that part of the issue? Or why is it that they are still being perpetuated?
So, I had written this article for Brand Equity a few years back, which was like, if everybody is selling to Nirupa Roy, who is selling to Zeenat Aman? The
Yeah.
when it comes to how to look at a mother, it and then this whole corporate culture and a whole bunch of mbas sit down, put all their thinking on, man, how do I have to create a mother who is who research is going to give like a dark green, who nobody will feel threatened with, who we'll just give her 10 seconds of time before the brand window and maybe 2 seconds after the brand window, and she'll come through for us. This whole creation is not created for intimacy. It's not created for you to ever say, oh my god, I'm that's me. It's created to make you, so whatever you've been reading about, all the movies that you've watched, you know it's created to fall into that old pattern of motherhood. And that's why I feel that so many times what happens inside boardrooms is pretty much like Kap Panchayat, because you will see the same questions being asked in English. What will she wear? Will her hair be open? Will it be a bun? Open will be too much. I mean, there are times when just to have her drive is like a long dialogue over 2 3 meetings, because the whole thing is that she shouldn't threaten anyone. She should never become too um, too different. So it is a war. It is a creative war to make something come on TV which actually is fresh, new, and redefines what motherhood is. And I think, and the point is, it's a war. It's a part of our work lives. So we should go knowing that it should be a battle, and there should be blood in the boardroom. You should fight for it so that you get to create, flesh and blood women, and not like archetypes.
I love that. I asked for a behind the scenes look, and Swati's given me an insight into a bloody boardroom. So that really fits in now. I get a better picture. But Lipika, I would like your take on the same question also. In fact, I mean, given your own experience as a creator and your role as lead author of the GenderNext study, why is it so difficult to completely clean out stereotypes? Is it, again, like Swati said, is it just that worry of a battle? Is it a lazy, safe, easy approach to give up on that battle? Is it fear of backlash? Is it just that, what Swati said just now about strong portrayals of women may not resonate with audiences, male audiences, may make people uncomfortable? Or is it just a combination of everything? I'd like your take on this as well.
Yeah, so I think one big reason is that that it's so difficult to kind of root these stereotypes out, is that actually nobody is really actually looking at them at all. When you speak of strong portrayals of women, and the kind that Swati described, as well, right, where you are in a sense thoughtfully crafting new images of women, and there could be backlashes, and I think brands, in a sense, several brands have taken steps where they have tried to, and there has been a backlash to kind of see an image of a woman that may or may not fit into a culture or a society sort of vision of what that woman should be, how she should be like. And that is, of course, something that advertising needs to sort of understand and tackle better. But I think what we were trying to do through this report was actually look at what goes by unprotested, right? I mean, there are stereotypes that go by, in advertising and have for years, and are still very much part of mainstream advertising, which nobody protests against, right? We are okay with seeing images of a woman being sort of taught how to clean her house by a superstar, male superstar.
Yeah.
We are okay with, a woman always, in a sense, being shown standing or scurrying around doing some work while her family members are, sitting around or lounging. We are okay with seeing, younger women figure out what the menu is, or what the food plan is, again, while her sort of male counterparts are in a picnic, but are kind of just wondering where the food is. So I think the whole point of also the report was, I think, to open our eyes to things that actually go unnoticed, and things that we are, in a sense, in advertising, as creators, letting happen without really giving much thought to. And it was when we kind of looked through that frame is when a multitude of these stereotypes reveal themselves, right? And nobody's protesting these. I mean, these are the portrayals, in a sense, which actually form the bulk of how we, how advertising depicts women. But that also, in a sense, reveals how advertising and everybody who's at the the creation end of advertising sees women, right? And I think that is what is, in a sense, revelatory, and that is, in a sense, what we need to ask ourselves. Whether we are brand owners, brand creators, advertising copywriters, advisors, and that is something that the report also wanted really to spark as a conversation.
Absolutely. I think that, like you said, it's everybody is involved, all stakeholders are involved in this process. So let's get on to the brand side of it. Kartik, your question. So blood finally became red color with Rio ads from Bloom. I really want to know what went behind, the in the boardroom for this one. There was obviously no sugar coating the menstrual process. Walk us through a brand's perspective when you're actually taking that difficult call that Lipika was just talking about. So you're creating an ad that is bound to make people uncomfortable, but it reflects reality. So what was happening there? And were you at any stage worried that it would backfire? And how did you tackle that?
So firstly, I must thank everyone for having me here on this panel as the only sole male voice amongst all women. I promise not to mansplain anything, and I'm going to stay as direct and authentic as possible. Yeah? And to give you a snapshot of what happened in the boardroom, I think it wasn't really as salacious or as aggressive as it sounds out to be. I think it was very straightforward, saying that if we've designed a product meant for menstrual flow, specifically for heavy flow, and that's a problem as a subset of menses no one's even talking about. And then when you look at menses as a conversation, and that's completely masked as well. So I think the question that we simply went back with was that how do you talk about the benefit of the product or what the product even stands for if you can't reference blood? It's heavy flow blood. There is no extracting blood away from this equation. It's actually one of the core arguments that we used when we were fighting to get the ad back on air, saying that if there is any category or any product for which blood should be shown, it is this, because it is the only one biological process where blood is normally involved, right? You don't have Johnson and Johnson's having advertising for sutures, right? If you're going to get a massive gash and you need stitches, that's not a direct to consumer ad. And on the other side of the spectrum, we have a whole list of shows on TV where mythological ones involving people tearing opponents in halves and throwing bodies across the planet. And if that is okay, and if children are watching that, and if that is okay, then how can you say that the biological reality of half the planet is not okay? So, we are very, of course, thankful to our company for supporting us in this very brave stand. And our managing director also very clearly said that consumer truth is what has gotten us so far. So stick to consumer truth, and then we see what happens at the end of it. Was it risky? Yes. Were we afraid? Did we know that we were going to get banned? Pretty much, yes. But were we 100% sure we we're going to get this sort of a change out? No. At most, we relegated ourselves thinking, all right, we'll make it a digital only campaign, and we'll find some other way to use stills or to use Miss Apte and to figure out what the right communication should be. But thankfully, I don't think it occurred to anyone's mind, whether it's our team or our creative agency or anyone who's been a part of this process of bringing Rio to the market. No one thought for a second of coming up with an alternative communication, nor did anyone think, even after the ad was taken off the air, saying that, can we just switch it to blue? None of that conversation happened. I mean, one of the judges was very kind. He said, why don't you just make that one segment grayscale? As long as it's black and white and it's not red, we have no problems with it. You don't even have to make any cuts to the ad. But unfortunately, when you're wedded so tightly to consumer truths, even that was unpalatable to us. We said, no, either it's the full Monty, we go in for what it's worth, or we lose everything that we have. Fortunately, it worked out well. Beyond the brand and beyond any other accolades that we've received, I think the entire team is just very proud to have represented this one positive step of honesty for us and for all Indian women at large. There is, in research, and I'm sure Lipika and Manisha ma'am would attest to this, as would Swati, I'm sure, that in research we've come across numerous occasions where women told us that, the first menses or the first period of menarche is so traumatic. And a lot of women said that the first time I bled, I was very surprised that it's red, that I thought it was supposed to be blue. And this is documented not only in our primary research, but across brands and across geographies in New Zealand or UK or wherever. So if whatever small role we had to unmask this and bring honesty back into the conversation, we are very happy to have played our role.
No, absolutely. I think it's a great step. So I think that's essentially, the crux of the issue, that at the end of the day, you need to represent reality. There is only that much of, a dream world that one can create if you're not able to relate to it.
Indeed.
Swati,
Indeed.
my question to you. Sorry, I cut you short. Yes, go ahead, Kartik.
No. I mean, I was just the analogy on what you made, that, rarely is a woman's menses on a bicycle between sunflower fields on white denims. That's not an authentic representation of anyone's reality.
But you still had a white dress there. I have to point that out. I mean, Radhika Apte was still in a white dress. So we've come that close, but we need to retain the white dress.
My creative agency fought really hard with me, saying, Kartik, if the product works as well, she should not be worried about any stains or any leaks. I said, well, some category cues we should adhere to. So, all right, I'm not going to fight everything.
So, Swati, go ahead. You're on mute, though. Just unmute yourself.
Yeah. Am I unmuted?
Yes.
No. So for me, I used to laugh at that tagline, have a happy period. And I'm like, bhai saab, aapko pata hai ye cheez hai kya? I mean, happy period. It's like, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sorry. What were you asking,
No, my question to you is, something we've discussed before, in fact, that, from being relegated to the domestic realm and bathroom and kitchen more specifically. So now we're seeing in advertising, women are being shown as some kind of mutants only with superpowers, doing everything from, negotiating high powered deals to running marathons, doing laundry and cooking and cleaning. And of course, with all the high tech equipment, then they're helping kids with, homework and hosting grand parties, all on their period, wearing tight white pants and complete makeup. So I want to know, is that not perpetuating yet another type of stereotype? And that's a very dangerous one. This overachieving superwoman.
Totally. Because, on one level, patriarchy is okay with worshipping. Patriarchy is very, very scared of connecting or understanding. It's so much better to go through that whole thing of she's a goddess, and this one is just the two things, the fallen woman and the goddess.
Yeah.
And in this whole thing of in the worship, like she's also Bahu, she's also this, she also is like doing the IT returns, and she's trying to also fight a case for the maid. And so obviously those I won't even talk about. But the problem is, if you guys remember, 2 years back, I had done an anemia awareness campaign called Stridhan.
Right.
And yeah, and it was, we very nicely pitched it around Dhanteras to say, this Dhanteras, don't invest in gold, invest in iron, because the iron that you have becomes gold inside you. Oh my God. Thank God there was no research. But the whole problem was, is it too sexy? Yeah, this is too sexy. I'm like, what is so sexy? I can't see a cleavage, I can't see thighs, I can't see midriff. No, the way she's eating is very sexy. Now that was a new thing, because people think women eating is sexy. And I'm like, so I went to Google, and even on Google, if you see woman eating food, you will see her looking at a salad leaf or holding her. So this whole act, and I think that, see, the problems are there. But I had a great client who said, just go ahead. And it became crazily viral. But I can't ever imagine that ad going through research,
Right.
because people think anemia awareness, and even though we were talking about urban women, 1 out of 2 women have anemia in the urban landscape. But the whole thing is, if you're talking anemia, you don't make it like that. It's too sexy. It's so nice looking. So it's like they decide how women should be spoken to. When you have to worship her, उसको brand window के पहले 10 चीजें करेगी, ठीक है? वो is one thing, वो research में चला जाएगा. Or the second thing will be this Abla Nari who will look at Ranveer Singh, who will come and tell her how to put the toilet cleaner nozzle. So I mean, don't get me started on it. But yes, these things exist. Like this is too sexy, this is too nice looking. So there is no language available. There's no language available to talk about desire, to talk about those other little fine things, and I think those things are so important. And some brands and some brand custodians kind of hold your hand and make you do that work. Otherwise, it'll never see the light of the day. And thank God for digital. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. It's so interesting that you talk about food, because as one interesting aspect, insight from the report is just exactly this, that the way women are portrayed eating any kind of food is so drastically different from the way men are. And this whole, the sexiness and the lusciousness of any kind of food in a woman's hand is multiplied for no effect, virtually, except for that, that initial attractiveness. So, Manisha, I'd like to bring you in at this point. We're talking about nuances and we're talking about categories. And as the report says that, across categories like food, what we've just discussed, that there are intrinsic problems within each category. Food has women being portrayed in a certain way. I think the other categories where there are more men-oriented products, those have their own intrinsic problems. But across categories, one common insight has been that there's a tremendous mental and emotional load being placed on women. In addition to all the physical load, of course. So she's placed at the core of festivities. She's in charge of creating joy for the family. She also has to handle anxieties. She must win the approval of all. 10 तरह की चीजें खाना बनाया and everyone has to say, oh, it's so good, papa के लिए ये, चिंटू के लिए ये, and all of that. This is perpetuated in other media as well, in OTT and TV and cinema. But just sticking to advertising, do you think it is easy for advertisers to take that first step to start breaking through this kind of a depiction? It's too much for women.
No, absolutely, it is too much, and I think there is also that burden of expectation that then seeps into real life. So it is so while of course women are doing much more, but I think there is no leeway shown in advertising for her to just take a break or for her to sit. While let's say somebody else is doing the work, or I think even was an advertising which was quite highly appreciated for the fact that the woman was shown as the boss of her husband, but when she had to come home and then cook for him. So I think there is no letting go of the traditional roles, and there is no letting go of again, as the report says, that women are free to do more, but they are not free to do less. And that's really a new stereotype that is being perpetuated in the name of progressive advertising. And it's I think, as Swati was saying, it's dangerous and it's scary, because advertising builds a certain aspirational destination for all of us, including women, right? I mean, we see something. So whether it's any media or advertising, I mean, we see something and we subconsciously you are trying to mold yourself into images that are shown as aspirational or shown as desirable. And then what are we actually doing to the lives of women? Are we telling them that it's not okay to not look perfect? You're churning out a 5-course meal for your family, and but your one hair is not out of place, your kitchen looks spick and span. So sometimes I think these depictions creep in, even though the ad, let's say, is not a beauty ad, it's a food ad, and the woman doesn't have to look like she's perfectly turned out in blow dried hair while she's making noodles or something. But I think that's what Lipika was alluding to, that these are things that just go unnoticed. We don't question these, and it's almost there is an aesthetic of advertising which disregards uh, and that is unnecessary beyond a point. So I think those are the kind of depictions that I think what the report is trying to do is to just bring to light, and to tell us that hey guys, look, this is all that's happening, as you probably haven't even thought about it. And I think when we were talking with a lot of the creative guys as part of this process, I think they said that just the way sometimes you start a script which is saying the script's open on, and you're just talking of background which is not even central to the story, where the lady is chilloing mutter and the man is reading the Economic Times. And sometimes the actual ad has nothing to do with it, the brand has nothing to do with this kind of depiction, but it just creeps in. And and that is because I think also what happens is that when an ad is being created, the people around it are looking only at that ad. But as consumers, you are actually now, and all of us are also consumers. We just see so many ads, and when you see ad after ad, category after category, and decade after decade, these images kind of being portrayed, that's what kind of makes it harmful, and that's what makes it dangerous. If it was a couple of ads doing this, honestly, it wouldn't matter. But these are the dominant images we are seeing, and that is what becomes problematic.
Very true. Right. Lipika, we continuing to talk about category-wise insights. There were so many clear trends that emerged in the report, and I'd like you to, just talk about at least one area where I feel more things seem to have changed. The more they seem to, be the same. Beauty. You've got a lot of diversity, but at the same time, there are still a lot of those repeating stereotypes which just refuse to budge. With body positivity becoming a critical part of our lives and the narrative of, especially the younger generation today, what do you think were the most problematic tropes in the beauty segment that emerged? I think Lipika's screen seems to have frozen.
Indeed.
Lipika, can you hear us? Okay, we'll just wait for her to reconnect. Yeah, I think there's been a little connection issue with Lipika's internet, possibly. Kartik, we'll get into a question for you then.
Please.
And so until recently, in categories like finance and auto, or even tech gadgetry, woman was pretty much excluded. Even now, if she's included, she's either in auto ad, she's the objectified sizzle factor, or otherwise she's a silent onlooker, and she's clearly not the decision maker. Are brands making a mistake by not taking a woman's role in decision making seriously?
how would you how would you define a mistake, right? Because a lot of these campaigns have gone on to deliver their KPIs. They've gone on to sell successful products. Sutra's entire campaign on objectifying Katrina drinking that mango juice, I think everyone remembers it. At least every Indian male has it imprinted at some point in their psyche. It's done. So would you call that a success? I would say so. Having said that, is it a mistake? Absolutely. It's an ethical mistake more than anything else, right? I think, and I personally feel very strongly for this because I believe it's the prerogative of the brand more so than anyone else to try and push the needle towards normalization and towards an equitable depiction of women in advertising, right? As the study notes that, of course, the creative types in the industry are known as you have a reputation for being the left-leaning ones. So we obviously are not the ones with a giant issue here about showing a liberal depiction of women, right? Consumers themselves, study after study has shown that people's lives have moved on far beyond what advertising is depicting now, right? So advertising does need to catch up in them. So people are ready as well. So then why is this gap? And it still persists across categories, as you rightly said. So unless a brand owner or a brand custodian is going to be, I wouldn't say he doesn't even have to be a vocal proponent, at least keep an open mind. That's the least expectation that I believe everyone should have. So that when your creative partners walk into the room with you, or when you walk into the room into your consumers' homes or their experiences, you can tend and take in inputs which are of a more varied experience, right? That will open you up and the entire creative process up to a more equitable distribution. And I again personally have a little bit of an issue with how we frame these questions as well, right? I don't think there's any piece of advertising that can come out tomorrow and completely change the psyche or the culture of how the country operates, right? It's impossible. But what is needed truly is one small step done by a multitude of brands over time, right? So this is a we are all in this together, right? And it doesn't matter if SBI has the most progressive take or Tanishq has the most progressive take on what the category is. One alone will never stand right. And there are more examples of what we noted in the previous 6 months itself of communication coming under massive backlash, even for talking about fairly straightforward aspects of what Indian culture stands for, right? So, is it a mistake? An ethical one? Yes. Business wise, perhaps not, depends on the campaign. But like I said, we all need to roll up our sleeves and
Yes.
realize what is it that we're doing. If a 30-year-old swamp has been created right under our noses, then we bear some of the responsibility of clearing that as well.
No, absolutely. I think that's very well put, in fact. Kartik, I'm going to ask you to answer Natasha's question. This is an audience question that we've just received. Women are still depicted as unattainable goddesses. I'm just putting this up on the screen. Still depicted as unattainable goddesses in ads. What are your views on the importance of the role of the supporting male protagonist? I think this is an interesting one to have you answer. And Swati, I'd like your take on this as well. So let's start with you, Kartik.
I think this firstly is a fantastic question, and I think we need far many more cases of supporting male protagonists, if for nothing else, but to try and balance out the tide of what we've been seeing for a decade. And if we have to try and push the needle back towards a little bit more center. But I'm all in support of this because again, in advertising, as with culture, with films and media, this is what will help progress the rest of the country on the cultural barometer, right? So if we have to show more stay-at-home dads, and that's a very far-out extreme examples, normalization, as we've come to realize, it begins much before that. It's okay to show a man in the kitchen enjoying to cook a meal, right? It's okay to show someone taking charge of the laundry. It didn't have to, I mean, great for whatever Ariel did and fantastic because it was the first one to do it. But it's not the most world ending of opportunities and acts if you fold your laundry, right? It's your own damn underwear. You should be able to wash it once in a while, right? It's not the most far out notion there. So I am all for having more supporting male protagonists across advertising. Consequently, you put women in the main role and in the spotlight, and again, that's something that I'm all good for.
Swati?
I'm a little allergic to, because there's a lot of confusion. Ye na, in a weird way in the boardroom, permissive man को progressive सोचते हैं, ठीक है? So then वो permissive man की पूजा हो जाती है. Like then the camera is on the man as he picks up the child and says, "You go to work, मैं हूँ ना." And nobody's looking. The woman is like, then the camera is going close and he just does this with the eyes and then the music starts. So if we have to truly show progressive, our benchmark has to be, so in for many brands, I prefer to speak to women directly rather than this kind man. There was a mother dairy, was it a mother dairy ad in which that father-in-law, like that, those, I think the boy had stolen money from the mom and the mom was angry, and then the whole family was piling onto the mother because she had scolded. Yeah, but the whole thing was it had to end with the way the father-in-law took her side and just, so it all became for the father-in-law. So this, this abla nari aankhon mein, that aanchal mein doodh, aankhon mein pani, that upsets me.
That's a suffocating trope that is continued. Yeah.
Yeah, and then why do you, then I don't want to bring up to daughters to now look for a kind man in office, in your romantic relationship. And the search is to find yourself and have agency and not always look for, pehle hamare zamane mein tall, dark, handsome tha. Now tall, dark, kind-hearted, like that all narrative needs to change.
Kind and
But
permissive.
yes,
Let's do this.
No, and I'm a romantic feminist. I like men and everything. It's just that I don't like it when their kindness takes over my 30 seconds and I have nothing to do with the woman.
That's well put.
Very well put.
Lipika, we missed out on a few minutes with you, but we'll come back to the question we had, posed. Essentially, we were talking about the beauty category, and we were going through various categories. And what we find in beauty is that the more things seem to have changed, I think the more they stayed the same. So I wanted to check with you, ask you to give us an overview on the most problematic tropes that persist in the beauty segment today. And the reason why I bring this up specifically is because for the next generation, I feel that a conversation on body positivity has become so important. But what are we still missing out on?
I mean, interestingly, you could say that any ad featuring a woman is a beauty ad. It doesn't need to belong to the beauty category.
Sure.
Just in terms of how she is casted, how she is styled, there are very specific standards, that I think for years we haven't been able to, get away from, and so there is a typical, body type, there is a typical kind of hair, there is a typical, so whether it is a beauty ad or not, I think it's, it is, it's fair to sort of agree that any ad with a woman has a beauty standard applied to it. Coming specifically to the beauty category itself, and when we were looking at advertising over the last 5 years, and in fact if you compare the advertising in the beauty category over the last 5 years to say, what happened maybe 10 years ago, you would say that it's moved a lot. You would say that there's been a lot of, lot of change in terms of, some sort of tropes that were very part of, say, fairness cream, category, right? Where there was this overt anxiety, a woman sort of being made to feel, specifically sort of bad about herself and, kind of being beaten down because of the color of her skin, and things like that. And those overt, sort of very strongly exaggerated, tropes seem to have waned a little. But there are, other tropes that are, that are still, absolutely sort of, stay in place, and, tropes like the fact that a woman is, in a sense, always welcoming of the gaze of others, always welcoming of compliments, which in some ways is problematic, right? Because not only does it tell women that, all compliments that you receive, are good and they come from a good place, it also, in a sense, gives permission to others to expect that, what you would say to a woman about her appearance, positively will be well received. And that is not true. And, advertising, in a sense, beauty advertising, majorly sort of uses, this trope. Body positivity, I think, is becoming, visually sort of, part of the conversation in advertising. And you see a variance, in the kinds of bodies you see. Yet, I would say that the standards still applied. I mean, even though there is some diversity, it is still of a certain kind, right? It is still actually, overtly beautiful. It still conforms to almost every beauty standard, that exists in terms of what conventional beauty today is, is recognized as. So even though you see different, maybe shades on different skin tones, you will still see startlingly, beautiful women, even though they might be darker, today than maybe you saw earlier. And where there are instances, of, and, there was a recent soap advertisement, which had women of all shapes and sizes in it, right? But one, the question there is, the way they were framed again was it was stigmatized. It was the fact that their appearance did not conform, and it was the fact, the way that they looked were in some ways showcased as almost the hurdles that they were trying to overcome. Instead of normalizing it, even what we were just talking about, when I heard Swati talking about the fact that, right, you need to normalize stuff, right? You need to normalize the man doing something without any without sort of being coded or being over celebrated. Yeah, exactly. And the fact that you could have somebody who's overweight, you could have somebody who's of a different skin tone, or has a certain skin condition, or a different kind of hair texture, and all of these in a sense become normalized, versus stigmatized. Another trope that we very usually see, and I feel that is one of the biggest tropes, new tropes in advertising, beauty advertising today, is when you see sort of girl gangs. You see 4 or 5 girls together, in a beauty cream, or a face wash, or a commercial, dressed in a similar way, wearing the same sorts of colors, their hair made up to be the same. They even speak, and they they move, they dance, all it's in a synchronized sort of sameness, which again, what that does is it actually really just erases the fact that each of those women is an individual woman, right? Each of those women is herself, and this tendency, in a sense, to cast a bunch of beautiful girls as just that, right? As just a trope in itself is something that is very widely today, in a sense, part of across brands. I mean, it's amazing that so many brands use it, even though brands would try to differentiate with their imagery. You kind of see brands falling into the same trope, over and over.
Right. I think that even though it does reflect a lot of what teenagers do, but you're right. At the end of the day, it just takes away from the individuality completely. We are actually running out of time, so I am going to go a little quickly through the next round of questions, which are essentially, I just wanted all of you to, give us closing statements on your recommendations. Swati, I'm going to start with you. Your campaigns, they've been edgy, they've challenged conventional beliefs, whether it's Sindoor Khela or Out and Proud, and where you're calling all out for inclusivity in various ways. But I just wanted to ask you, how would you recommend other brands take up that responsibility? You said that advertising at the end of the day for you is, and also for your brands, is it's a responsibility to inspire people to create the kind of world they deserve. So, what are your recommendations to creators and to brands to actually come closer to creating that kind of world that we all deserve?
Yeah, so I think, in a way, however much, like one thing I know about consumers and is that they know the difference between authenticity and just tokenism. You know, so similarly, when Vogue does an inclusivity issue, I'm like, what's wrong with you guys? Why do you need to do an inclusivity issue? Vogue should have, if you can't have like one issue in March with which you have, larger sized women. So, all that, when it's so tinny and, that all like doesn't sit right. The other thing is that, we, the granularity, or even I'm just talking about women as consumers, how they are in their flesh and blood, their desire, what they like, to be able to feel, to tell a brand that I'm a lazy mom. I mean, just little truths like this. Like, ages back, I had done a commercial with Conconas, and I don't know how I managed to take that forward. Through research, it had one line which said, आज एक बात का ख्याल आया कि अपने ही लिस्ट में अपना नाम नहीं. It's a very quiet moment. It's all the, I have to do this, the party, the thing, the kids, and it's just that. A woman with her job list feeling,
Yes.
why the fuck am I not here? Now, those things I feel are real. Those things are not about you want to have the, from the planet of kindness, your ambassador, your husband standing behind you. So I feel these stumble upon moments are very
Yes.
precious. You know express them express them on TV, so that people understand. Because, even if you look at the reality of research, how these women are bundled up together in this hot sweaty room, and then आपको क्या लगता है ये कैसी माँ होगी? Just the questions, I mean, my skin crawls. So, they are suddenly, you've put them in a
Yeah.
situation in which they have to then stand up and say that, and it's that thing, and that one woman says, and then the others also nod. हाँ, ये ना थोड़ी strong लग रही है मुझे. Now, what is it? We have loved our Rajnis as a culture. We have always liked these little feisty, but why do they fail in research? So I think, you know there is we have to, we are consumers ourselves, and that little intuitive understanding of man, woman, roles, mother, father, child, so important, and not do this little cutout, like, okay, now I'll show fat woman, dark woman, this, and then I'll show, like, all that is also like a formulaic thing. So I think we have to
Absolutely.
just work with our hearts, and the marketing department has to think of themselves as creative partners and not just sellers.
Right. Absolutely. Drop the tokenism. I think that's primarily it, and go by instinct. Feel from the heart, because it's just so true that we don't have that space where women can express the deeper feelings that that we are all living with.
Again, I'm sorry, I must be coming across with this whole I me mine, but I'm taking examples of my work because at least I'm not like, from prospective client, not angering them. But, I did this tire ad which just won the Lardley Award, about a mother having a busted tire on the highway, and her daughter changes the tire, and it's very nicely, the mom's surprised, and the mom says, "Kahan se seekha?" And she's putting it, she says, Papa ko dekha tha, ab chale. Now, the other problem is, why did you say Papa? Why couldn't the child say YouTube? I'm like, why? Why can't the child? I mean, just because I'm showing a mother, why, the father is not some abusive drunkard who
Yeah,
has no skills around the house.
yeah.
Because
We can't
then it's like,
overcompensate the other way.
so suddenly I'm like, why? What's wrong with Papa ko dekha tha? नहीं, utna, if you say मैंने YouTube में देखा था, I said नहीं. I want to say Papa ko dekha tha. I like the idea of a daughter, father, her learning these little masculine things from. So then you have to fight because then, these are the. So basically, we have to fight. There's no. That's
We're
my
taking
thing.
that. Kartik, a quick word of advice from you to marketers, to brand managers on how to close that gap between how women are seeing themselves and how advertising is showing them.
I think to Swati ma'am's point, right? Firstly, ask everyone to avoid the tropes. We've seen enough tropes, everyone recognizes them. Have a touch of authenticity in the content that you design and you make, right? And some two real logical pieces of input. One is, again, look within your own circles, right? We are all a sum of the five people who we spend the most time with. Each of those five have a set of parents and probably another set of in-laws and very, very different relationships with the both of them. So draw upon their uniqueness and their idiosyncrasies, right? When Swati ma'am said she's a lazy mom, I couldn't stop laughing because my mom's the laziest mom around. I have made my own dabba for 10 years in school, got accustomed to, I thought lunch is only bread and jam. That's how it's supposed to be. So,
Listen, I need to see your mom, and I need to what freed me, and you must go and tell her this. I
mhm,
saw an, I saw an interview of Aparna Sen, and they asked her that, tell me, Aparna, what is your mantra for motherhood? Because you've obviously done such a great job with Konkona. And she said two words: benign neglect. And I'm
indeed.
like, this woman. I mean, this woman I worship.
No, as someone who's come out of the tunnel of benign neglect, I firmly attest to it. Yeah, so there is merit there. So please, I would urge every content designer to draw upon those relationships.
Yeah.
I know each one of my friends have differing relationships with their mothers, and each is a gem of an individual. So that's a slice of reality waiting to be explored. And if you simply take upon these small slices, integrate them into your communication, you automatically get brownie points for it, which is the
You
more
do.
evil, pragmatic side of me never understands why does anyone not leap upon this opportunity. I think it's the simplest thing you can do to get brownie points. Why aren't you doing it? It's ridiculous, you know. And lasting a small another piece of advice is for the set and the aesthetic planners. Please make the set real. Half the game is there. There are no pastel curtains around, and there are no clean counters in any homes in India. There is no space to have clean countertops. उधर कुछ बच
No,
गया तो उधर सामान
and-
जाएगा.
but they are very funny. So, भैया sleeveless blouse नहीं पहन सकते, बाल नहीं खोल सकते, but guess what you're granted? Open kitchen. Open kitchen में होगी.
Correct.
Kitchen open होगा. हाँ, चाहे mindset close हो.
Right.
I said close,
So
open kitchen.
I couldn't have thought of a better way to end it than that. So I'm going to leave it. Yeah. Closed mind and open kitchen.
Lipika, closing comments from you, especially with respect to this whole gap. And I mean, there's a brilliant section. I think it was one of the most interesting sections in the report where you're talking about how women are seeing themselves. I think that was quite a revelation because even though you know it and you're living the life, sometimes you need to see it in front of you. So with, just keeping that in context, what would your recommendations be?
Yeah, I think, women, and when we showed them some pieces of advertising, that we also got women to kind of react to, advertising and see how they see the women that are being depicted, right, in their life stages or their life roles. And that's the thing, right? I mean, especially when you actually talk about young women, there is a real impatience, now to kind of being able to see themselves, happiness and joy and freedom being normalized, this constant sort of, where women are portrayed, young women especially, having to fight, having to ask for permission, having to constantly negotiate with whether it's the father or even the elder brother, at times, for the permission to go out at night, permission to, go out with friends, ride a scooty at night. And there is a real sort of an impatience, with these sort of depictions, and an absolute, actually annoyance, exactly at the kind of stuff that we were just talking about, where this bestower of these freedoms is celebrated, where the father who, after a long negotiation, lets you go out at night, becomes that central hero, of that ad. And also, in fact, and again, this is probably generational, but when you kind of ask young women and when you show them a lot of food advertising, or advertising of, home cleaning in the domestic realm, their vision of who they will be, as mothers, as wives, is starkly different, and and there is in fact almost, a sudden sort of a fearful, reaction, saying, oh my God, is this how life will be? I mean, is this what I will be doing if I have to get married? I can't, I mean, that can't be, because I imagine a much more equal partnership with my spouse, that I think he will be helping me, I see us being equally sort of doing chores around the house. I will be working, so he will, I'm sure, clean up the kitchen counter, to help me out. And so I think there are all of these, insights where we know that women are moving ahead, they have moved forward, and very quickly there will be, in a sense, almost a resistance and an annoyance with a lot of these tropes that we see in advertising, which probably as of now, with maybe a certain generation of women, have gone maybe ignored, and they've not probably, in a sense, protested it, but you can almost guess that in the next 5 to 10 years, with young women being much more vocal, having much more access to media, the impatience with such tropes is on the rise.
Absolutely. I think it's already set in, and we can see that even as creators, there is a voice which is coming, which is calling up or calling out all of these tropes. And even as viewers, there's enough of that feedback. You see it on social media more than ever before.
Absolutely.
Manisha, closing remarks from you, but I'd like you to address the content consumers. The report has very, very clear frameworks on how to help creators and brands deal with this, to recognize the tropes that are just kind of slipping in. A very important objective of the entire exercise has also been to get people to recognize those underlying and deep set, self-perpetuating stereotypes, often around women. So it's this repeated subliminal messaging that's not immediately apparent, but it's so powerful, and we've seen that. So I'd love for you to, address the vast community of content consumers that you're addressing today. What role do they have in controlling and creating a new narrative?
No, absolutely. And I think, as I mean, all of us in that sense, and I think probably everyone today is both a content creator and a content consumer. I mean, all of us are, we are constantly kind of streaming our own lives, our own thoughts. And therefore, we have a view on how we all want to be projected. And I think, the other interesting thing is that I find for people who are going to be creating any kind of advertising content, that there is now so much more interesting and exciting, there are so many more options, and there is so much more exciting that's happening. So why are you kind of trapping yourself into also these corners which are soon on their way to obsolescence, and something that consumers will reject? So I just feel that there is so much of an opportunity to actually enrich your storytelling, to enrich your narratives, by being a little bit more alive to who your consumer is and who the woman of today is, and what are the new family structures, what are the new dynamics between genders, how are they unfolding. And so I would just say that this kind of an exercise of kind of really introspecting and going back and seeing where advertising is lagging behind in some way, I just feel is going to be something which is actually very enriching for advertising. And if we open our eyes to this, that we will see better advertising, and also more successful advertising from a brand metric point of view. Advertising that relates better to its consumers, that consumers see as more relatable, that consumers say, yes, this is what I would like to do, this is the kind of brand that's talking my language. I mean, those are all big wins for brands, right? So I just see that if you're just alive to what women are saying about themselves today in all kinds of ways. I mean, as Swati was saying, I mean, really doesn't need to do research anymore. I mean, the women are putting out their views, in the public domain. They're all there for us to see. So I would just say that we should look at this as a big opportunity to enrich advertising and to, collectively kind of, take it a few steps ahead and hopefully just catch up with where the woman is today.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, it's all about those underlying beliefs. And that's in the mind of all the key stakeholders, not just the creators, but also the consumers. And we need to just recognize that there is a lot of impact of that subliminal messaging on us, on every day, in fact. So on that note, thank you so much. I'd like to, really, it's been a very interesting discussion. And Kartik, thank you. You definitely did not mansplain your way through. And you can be rest assured on that aspect. It was a pleasure hearing your perspectives. And thank you so much. Manisha, Swati, Lipika, Kartik, thank you all for joining us today and in this very interesting conversation.
Thank you so much. It was a
Thank you,
pleasure.
everyone. Yeah,
Thank
thank you,
you.
Parul. Bye-bye.